This is the video the VA absolutely does not want you to see. If you are a veteran struggling with a disability claim, if you've been denied, or if you feel like your file is just sitting in a digital black hole gathering dust, then you are about to receive an education that cost former VA employees their careers to share. We are diving deep behind the curtain, pulling back the layers of bureaucracy and revealing the 10 hidden secrets, the core truths that dictate whether your claim ends in a quick approval or years of agonizing appeals. These aren't general tips you hear on every forum. These are tactical, internal operational truths that shift the entire power dynamic back to you, the veteran. Getting your claim approved isn't just about documenting your injuries. It's about understanding the internal language, the unspoken priorities, and the very real biases of the people reviewing. Your life's suffering. The system is designed to be confusing, but today we break the code. Are you ready to change your outcome? Let's get started with the first and perhaps most critical secret, the unspoken hierarchy of evidence. The first secret former VA employees reveal is that not all evidence is created equal, and there is an unspoken internal hierarchy that dictates how quickly a claim moves and what level of scrutiny it receives. You might think a stack of private doctor notes holds the same weight as military records, but within the VA system, they absolutely do not. The raters, the decision review officers, DROs, and Rating Veterans Service Representatives, RVSRs, are trained to prioritize certain types of documentation above all others because it simplifies their workload and minimizes the risk of the claim being overturned during internal quality reviews. Understanding. This hierarchy is the difference between a 6-month wait and a 6-year fight. At the very top of this evidence pyramid sits the golden standard: contemporaneous service treatment records, STRs. If an injury, illness, or event is documented while you were still serving, and it directly connects to your current diagnosis, the claim is almost bulletproof. The raters see this, they check the boxes, and they move on. This is the fastest track. This is the evidence that requires minimal interpretation or secondary verification, making it the most desirable documentation for a high-volume rater. The internal quality review process, which scrutinizes decisions, places the highest value on approvals supported by these original in-service documents because they are the least disputable evidence of causation and timing. But what if you don't have those STRs? What if your injury was reported, but not recorded, or if the condition didn't manifest until years later? This is the reality for the majority of combat veterans and those who served in high-stress, low-reporting environments where medical documentation was impossible or discouraged due to operational tempo or fear of career repercussions. This is where the hierarchy gets subtle and dangerous. The next tier down is buddy statements and lay evidence, but only when those statements are highly specific, detailed, and corroborated. A vague statement saying he was injured is worthless and often dismissed as subjective opinion. The elevated, high-retention version, the kind that raters are trained to accept, is a detailed statement saying, "I saw Sergeant Jones fall off the Humvee on October 14, 2005, during Operation Desert Fox, and he immediately complained of knee pain, requiring us to carry him back to the AFOB. I remember this specifically because we had to repeat the radio check 3 times due to his inability to hear." That level of detail is powerful because it provides context, date, and location, allowing the rater to cross-reference potential unit records or operational logs, even if your personal STRs are missing. This level of specificity transforms lay evidence from a suggestion into a concrete piece of the puzzle, mimicking the reliability of an STR. The VA internally finds the most credibility in lay evidence that comes from 3 specific groups: fellow service members who were present during the event, spouses or family members who can detail the post-service onset and functional impact, and the veteran's own testimony, provided it is structured professionally. The third tier, and this is where most veterans fail, is private medical evidence. Private doctor notes are often viewed with a degree of skepticism, not because the doctors are untrustworthy, but because the VA raters know that private practitioners often lack the specific VA knowledge needed to phrase diagnoses using the exact language required by the rating schedule. Furthermore, the raters often suspect, rightly or wrongly, that private doctors are simply writing what the patient asks for. To make private evidence effective, it must be accompanied by a comprehensive nexus letter. And I mean comprehensive. The nexus letter must explicitly state without ambiguity that the current condition is at least as likely as not due to the veteran's military service. It must cite specific medical literature, reference the veteran's STRs, even if they are thin, and address any potential contradictions in the file, such as pre-existing conditions. For example, if the veteran had a minor knee injury playing sports in high school, the nexus letter must state, while the veteran sustained a minor sprain in 2005, the current severe degenerative joint disease is definitively and proximately linked to the high-impact stress and repeated heavy lifting required during military service from 2007 to 2011, which significantly aggravated the pre-existing condition beyond its natural progression. This detailed defense, using medical literature and specific regulatory language, is what elevates private evidence from a suggestion to a piece of documentation that can actually challenge a negative C&P exam. Without this precise language, your private medical evidence sinks to the bottom tier, often ignored or discounted entirely when it conflicts with a negative C&P exam. The final lowest tier of evidence is the non-specific generalized documentation, the stuff that proves you have a condition but doesn't connect it to service, like prescription lists, general therapy notes, or imaging reports without a strong narrative connecting the dots. Former VA employees confirm that when a rater is faced with a backlog, they will spend 90% of their limited time focused on files with high-tier evidence, letting the others languish. They are looking for the path of least resistance, and your job is to make your claim the easiest path to approval. This secret isn't just about what you submit. It's about the quality and specific phrasing of every single document, ensuring you align with the VA's internal preference for irrefutable, contemporaneous proof, or failing that, perfectly crafted nexus statements that bridge the gap seamlessly. We must treat every piece of paper like it's being judged in a court of law, where the judge already has a bias against the plaintiff. Now, let's talk about secret number 2, which addresses the digital purgatory where claims often go to die, the secret role of the stuck queue, and the tactical maneuvers required to bypass it. When you submit a claim, it enters a complex digital workflow, but not all workflows are created equal. The VA uses internal metrics, often referred to as end product codes, or EP codes, to track and prioritize claims. A claim that is straightforward, say a secondary claim for plantar fasciitis due to a service-connected knee injury, might move relatively smoothly. But claims that are complex, require multiple levels of review, involve historical records retrieval, or critically involve presumptive conditions that need specific regulatory checks, often get shunted into what VA staff internally call the stuck queue. This isn't an official designation, it's a descriptor for files that require more than one or two steps to resolve, effectively becoming too complicated for the standard high-volume rater to handle efficiently. Raters are measured on their throughput, how many claims they close per day or week, and a complex claim that will take 3 hours instead of 30 minutes is a drag on throughput. When a rater sees such a file, they often park it, focusing on easier claims to meet their daily production goals. The stuck queue is where years are lost. So, how do you avoid this digital tar pit? Former VA employees reveal the key: segmentation and proactive intervention. Do not submit a massive, complex claim covering 5 different conditions all at once if those conditions require wildly different types of evidence or service connection theories. This claim is a guaranteed stuck queue candidate because the rater has to coordinate 5 different C&P exams, potentially 2 different stressor verifications, and cross-reference multiple medical disciplines. Instead, segment your claims. Submit the most straightforward, high-probability claim first. For example, tinnitus, which often only requires an audiology exam and proof of noise exposure. Get that 10% rating. Now you have an established rating and a foothold in the system. Once that is approved, then submit the more complex claims, perhaps as secondary claims or claims requiring historical research. By segmenting the claim, you break down the overwhelming complexity into manageable pieces that individual raters can process quickly, avoiding the too hard, put it aside mentality of the stuck queue. Furthermore, proactive intervention is crucial. Once a claim has been pending for 90 days without movement, meaning no C&P exam scheduled, no request for further evidence, you must intervene. The most effective method is not a generic phone call to the 1-800 number. That is often useless. The effective method involves contacting the VA directly through the VERA system, Virtual Entry Resource Application, and scheduling a virtual appointment with a regional office employee, or, even better, utilizing the White House VA hotline, but with a specific articulated request. You must phrase your communication not as a complaint about delay, but as an inquiry about a missing piece of evidence or a failure of the duty to assist. For example, I am concerned that the VA has failed to retrieve my records from the National Archives required for this specific period, resulting in a stall. Can you confirm the date the request was sent and the expected retrieval time? This technical inquiry forces the representative to open your file, look at the internal notes, and often generate a task for a rater to update the status. By focusing the inquiry on a specific actionable failure point, a developmental error, you force the VA to pull the file out of the stuck queue and assign it to a specific person who must then document their action. This visibility is the kryptonite to the stuck queue. Remember, the system relies on files remaining invisible and untouched. Visibility forces action, and former VA staff know that a congressional inquiry immediately elevates a file's priority level, often bypassing standard review times entirely because it affects the VA's public and political standing. This strategic use of external pressure is not whining. It is mastering the bureaucratic leverage points. Moving on to secret number 3, perhaps the most unsettling truth about the claims process. The truth about C&P examiners: they are not neutral. Many veterans enter the compensation and pension C&P exam, believing the examiner is an impartial medical professional whose sole goal is to accurately assess their disability. This is a dangerous misconception that former VA staff universally confirm. The C&P exam is not a doctor's visit for treatment. It is an administrative procedure designed to gather evidence for the VA's benefit. Whether the examiner is a contracted third-party provider or a VA staff doctor, they are operating under a specific, highly structured mandate. To complete the Disability Benefits Questionnaire, DBQ, and provide an opinion on the nexus or connection between the current diagnosis and the veteran's service. Their primary loyalty is to the contract or the employer, the VA, not to the veteran's well-being. The secret here is understanding their true mission. To find reasons why the condition is not service-connected or why the severity is lower than claimed. They are trained to look for inconsistencies, pre-existing conditions, or alternative causes. They are not necessarily malicious, but they are incentivized, often subconsciously, to manage the VA's liability. This is why veterans often report feeling rushed, dismissed, or that the examiner focused only on the negative aspects. To counteract this, you must treat the C&P exam as a deposition, not a consultation. Every word you say must be carefully considered and directly relevant to the DBQ criteria. You must bring your own evidence and reference it clearly. Do not rely on the examiner to have read your entire file. Often, they have only reviewed a summary. When they ask about your pain, do not use vague terms. You must describe your worst day using functional limitations. Instead of saying, "My back hurts," say, "On my worst days, I cannot lift more than 5 pounds, and I require assistance getting out of bed," which occurs at least 3 days a week. This uses the language of the rating schedule, which is what the examiner must translate onto the DBQ. For conditions that fluctuate, like migraines or mental health, you must employ the SPIE. Worst day narrative. You must redirect the examiner away from your moderate day of the exam to describing your worst week or month in the last year, providing the extreme data points required for a high rating. Furthermore, former employees note a massive internal bias against accepting reports from C&P examiners who consistently rate veterans highly. If an examiner is seen as too veteran-friendly, their reports may be subjected to higher scrutiny, internal audits, or they may simply be assigned fewer exams. Conversely, examiners known for strict adherence to conservative ratings are often preferred. This means that if you receive a negative C&P exam, you must immediately obtain a private medical opinion, a nexus letter, that directly rebuts the C&P examiner's findings, point by point. Do not simply submit a new diagnosis. Your private doctor must specifically state why the VA examiner's conclusion was medically unsound or inconsistent with the evidence provided. This direct rebuttal is one of the few ways to overcome the inherent weight the VA places on its own examiner's opinions, forcing the rater to weigh 2 conflicting medical opinions rather than simply accepting the VA contracted one as gospel. The C&P exam is a hurdle, not a finish line, and preparing for it with the awareness that the examiner is an agent of the VA, not an ally, fundamentally shifts your preparation strategy from passive patient to active advocate. Secret number 4 is about mastering the language of the VA, the magic words that unlock service connection. The VA system is governed by specific regulations, medical codes, ICD codes, and legal precedents. Raters are not doctors or lawyers. They are administrators ticking boxes on a decision review checklist. If your documentation or even your narrative does not contain the specific language they are trained to look for, your claim will be denied, even if the medical facts are sound. The ultimate magic phrase is the aforementioned, "at least as likely as not." This is the legal standard of proof required for service connection, representing a 50% or greater probability. This phrase must appear in every single medical opinion supporting your claim. If your doctor uses phrases like "might be related," "could be caused by," or "possibly due to," the rater is legally obligated to disregard that opinion because it does not meet the legal threshold. But the EIQ deeper magic words relate to specific conditions and the theory of service connection. For instance, if you are claiming a condition based on the PACT Act or a specific regulation for Agent Orange exposure, you must explicitly reference the regulation or the location of exposure. Don't just say, "I was in Vietnam." Say, "My condition, type 2 diabetes mellitus, is a presumptive condition under 38 CFR 3.309E. due to my service in the Republic of Vietnam between 1968 and 1969. This cuts through the bureaucratic fog and immediately directs the rater to the correct section of the law, making their job easier and speeding up the decision. This precise terminology ensures the rater doesn't waste time trying to find a medical nexus that is not legally required. Another crucial set of magic words involves secondary service connection. Many veterans fail to explicitly link Condition A, service-connected, to Condition B, new claim. They might mention both, but they don't use the required language. The magic words here are "ni proximately due to," "buck," or "arpestib," aggravated by. For example, if you have service-connected severe knee pain and now you have chronic back pain, your documentation must explicitly state, "The chronic lumbar strain is proximately due to the altered gait and compensation required by the severe service-connected bilateral knee impairment." This establishes the necessary legal and medical bridge. Furthermore, if you have a pre-existing condition worsened by service, you must use the phrase, "The condition was permanently aggravated beyond its natural progression by service." The word "permanently" is critical because the VA only compensates for permanent aggravation. Former VA employees confirm that claims that explicitly cite the regulatory basis for the claim using these precise phrases are prioritized because they require minimal interpretation by the rater. Interpretation introduces the risk of error and delay. Clear citation eliminates it. Mastering the VA's internal lexicon transforms your claim from a plea for help into a legally sound, self-executing document that guides the rater precisely to the Approve button. Secret number 5 dives into the internal mechanics of the VA and addresses the persistent rumor that the VA loves denial and operates under a subtle quota system. While VA leadership publicly denies hard quotas for denials, former employees confirm that production pressure creates an environment where denial is the path of least resistance. A denial is often quicker to process than an approval, especially for complex claims. Approving a claim, particularly a high-percentage one, requires extensive documentation, multiple sign-offs, and opens the VA to decades of future liability and healthcare costs. Denying a claim, especially one lacking the magic words or high-tier evidence, is a relatively simple action that satisfies the daily metric of closed cases. The unspoken internal mandate is to process volume quickly. This creates a powerful incentive to deny marginal claims or those requiring extensive development. The secret here is not to fight the system by complaining about unfairness, but to submit a claim so robust that denying it would take more time and effort than approving it. You must make the denial indefensible. This means anticipating every possible reason for denial and preemptively addressing it within your initial submission. If the VA might argue your condition is pre-existing, your nexus letter must include a detailed medical history showing the condition did not exist before service or was significantly aggravated by service. If they might argue the condition has improved, your personal statement must focus on the current, persistent functional limitations, not just the diagnosis itself. Furthermore, understanding the internal quality review (QR) process is key. Claims are frequently audited internally for quality control. A rater knows that if they approve a weak claim, it might be flagged in an audit, potentially impacting their performance review. If they approve a strong claim, one with perfect nexus letters, strong STRs, and specific functional descriptions, they are protected because the approval will pass QR easily. They want to avoid the headache of having to justify a poor decision. Your goal is to provide them with the justification for approval on a silver platter, making the risk of denial higher than the risk of approval. This shifts the internal calculus from "how can I deny this quickly" to "this claim is unassailable, I must approve it to avoid an audit flag." This strategic defensive filing is the only way to counteract the inherent systemic bias toward minimizing liability and maximizing throughput. Secret number 6 focuses on one of the most powerful yet consistently misused pieces of evidence: the power of the personal statement and why 99% of veterans write them wrong. The personal statement, VA Form 21-4138 or similar, is often treated by veterans as a diary entry or a venting session about their military service or their frustration with the VA. Former employees stress that this is a critical mistake. The personal statement is your chance to provide the narrative thread that connects the disparate pieces of medical evidence and regulatory codes. It is the veteran's opportunity to fill the gaps that doctors and military records cannot. The secret to a high-impact personal statement is twofold: structure and specificity. First, structure it like a legal brief, not a letter to a friend. It must directly address the elements of service connection. 1. The in-service event, injury or disease, stressor. 2. The current diagnosed disability. And 3. The link, nexus, between the two. Each paragraph should have a clear purpose. Second, be hyper-specific about functional limitations and the date of onset. Do not say, "My back started hurting in 2008." Say, "The chronic sharp pain in my lower back began immediately following the deployment to Iraq in June 2008. I began using over-the-counter pain medication daily by September 2008, which is documented in my civilian pharmacy records." This level of detail transforms a vague complaint into a verifiable timeline. Crucially, the IAS personal statement must describe your worst day and the impact on your daily life, using the language of the rating schedule. Raters are looking for evidence of social and occupational impairment. They need to know if you can hold a job, maintain relationships, or perform basic self-care. A powerful statement doesn't just say, "I have PTSD." It says, "Due to the recurring nightmares and panic attacks documented on the attached log, I have been terminated from 3 jobs in the last 5 years because I frequently miss work or cannot interact professionally with colleagues. My social life is non-existent, and I rely entirely on my spouse for managing finances and appointments." This narrative directly supports a high rating by demonstrating the severity of the functional limitation. For conditions that fluctuate, the secret is to attach detailed logs and journals. Migraine logs, pain journals, or mental health symptom trackers that provide objective, measurable data on the frequency and severity of your worst days, which directly aligns with the VA's rating criteria. Former VA staff confirm that a well-written, structured, and corroborated personal statement often serves as the tiebreaker when the medical evidence is ambiguous or conflicting. It provides the human context needed to nudge the rater toward approval, especially when combined with powerful, specific buddy statements that corroborate the events and the subsequent changes in the veteran's life. The 99% failure rate comes from veterans treating this document emotionally rather than strategically. Use your emotions to fuel the writing, but structure the result with cold, hard facts and functional impact statements. Secret number 7 concerns the internal clockwork of the VA, the internal deadlines, and how to leverage them against the system. The VA operates under various statutory and internal deadlines, but these are often ignored unless external pressure is applied. The most critical deadline for veterans to understand is the 1-year rule for filing intent to file, ITF, and the 60-day rule for responding to VA requests for information. While these are known, the internal deadlines for the VA raters themselves are the real secret weapon. Raters are generally expected to complete specific actions within a certain time frame, such as 30 days to review new evidence or 45 days to request C&P exams. When these deadlines are missed, the file enters a state of bureaucratic limbo. The secret is leveraging the VA's own inefficiency by documenting every missed deadline and using that documentation to trigger intervention. If the VA sends you a letter requesting additional information and you submit it promptly, but then 60 days pass without any movement, you have grounds for intervention. The most effective leverage point, according to former staff, is the duty to assist, DTA. The VA has a legal obligation to help the veteran develop the claim. If the VA requested records from a military facility or the National Archives, and those records have not been received after a reasonable period, say 90 days, The VA has failed its DTA. Do not just wait. You must write a formal letter or use the congressional inquiry method mentioned earlier, explicitly stating, I believe the VA has failed its duty to assist under 38 U.S.C. par 5111-3A by not following up on the records request sent on date. I request immediate action to rectify this failure and move my claim forward. This language forces the VA to either prove they followed up or admit failure, which often results in the file being escalated to a supervisor for immediate review. Furthermore, if you are appealing a decision, understanding the internal review timelines is crucial. Higher-level reviews, HLR, and supplemental claims have specific processing goals. If your claim sits significantly outside these goals, you have a powerful tool for escalation. The VA fears two things: congressional inquiries and formal complaints about DTA failures. By meticulously tracking their deadlines and framing your intervention around their legal obligations, you force the VA to prioritize your file over those of veterans who are simply waiting patiently. Patience in the VA claims process is often the most expensive strategy. Secret number 8 addresses a deeply ingrained yet rarely discussed issue: the common rater bias against certain conditions, particularly traumatic brain injury, TBI, and mental health claims, like PTSD. While the VA officially treats all conditions equally, former employees confirm that raters often approach TBI and mental health claims with a higher degree of initial skepticism than physical injuries with clear objective evidence, such as a broken bone or severe arthritis. This bias stems from two primary sources: the difficulty in objectively measuring the severity of these conditions and the perceived higher risk of fraudulent or exaggerated claims. For mental health, the skepticism is often focused on the stressor. Did the stressor truly happen? Was the veteran truly exposed? For TBI, the skepticism revolves around the long-term residual effects, especially when the initial injury was subtle, e.g., a blast exposure without immediate loss of consciousness. To overcome this ingrained bias, your strategy must be to provide objective, verifiable proof for subjective conditions. For TBI, this means submitting specialized testing, neuropsychological evaluations, imaging reports, if available, and detailed reports from neurologists or TBI specialists that explicitly link current symptoms, e.g., memory loss, executive dysfunction, to the in-service event. These specialized reports are difficult for a general C&P examiner to refute and provide the objective medical markers raters need. For PTSD, you must focus relentlessly on stressor verification. If the stressor is combat-related, the process is easier, but if it is non-combat, personal trauma, e.g. military sexual trauma, or MST, the verification burden is extremely high. You must provide specific corroborating evidence, police reports, medical records from the time, statements from counselors, or highly detailed specific buddy statements that confirm the change in your behavior immediately following the event. If you cannot get direct corroboration for the event itself, you must focus on the behavioral markers that occurred shortly thereafter. Did you start drinking heavily? Did your performance decline? Did you seek counseling, even informally? Documenting the immediate, verifiable change in behavior acts as a powerful surrogate for direct stressor confirmation, which is what the rater is looking for to overcome their initial skepticism. Furthermore, for both TBI and mental health, the concept of functional impairment must be hammered home repeatedly. Since the conditions are subjective, the rating is entirely based on how they affect your ability to work and socialize. Ensure your personal statement and medical opinions use the specific language of the rating schedule, e.g., total occupational and social impairment, inability to maintain, minimum standards of hygiene, etc., to guide the rater past their bias and directly to the required rating percentage. Secret number 9 brings us back to the legal framework. the importance of the duty to assist, and the uncomfortable truth about when the VA intentionally fails it. As established, the VA must help you develop your claim. This includes retrieving service records, obtaining relevant medical records from federal facilities, and scheduling C&P exams. However, former VA employees admit that when a claim is marginal, complex, or potentially high cost, there is an unspoken incentive to perform only the minimum required DTA actions, hoping the veteran will fail to provide the necessary key evidence. This isn't always overt sabotage, but often a bureaucratic inertia. A request for records is sent once, and when it fails, no follow-up is initiated. The VA then denies the claim, based on lack of evidence, pinning the failure on the veteran. The secret is recognizing that the VA's failure to assist is often the strongest argument in death. You have for appeal. If you suspect the VA has failed its DTA, you must first confirm the failure. Did they ask for records you already submitted? Did they fail to follow up on a records request? Once confirmed, you use the supplemental claim or higher-level review process to explicitly challenge the DTA failure. You must state, the prior decision was based on an error in fact and law, specifically the VA's failure to fulfill its duty to assist under 38 U.S.C. Paragraph 5103A, by not following up on the records request sent on date. I request immediate action to rectify this failure and move my claim forward. This forces the new reviewer to either approve the claim immediately based on the DTA failure or initiate the record retrieval. Process immediately. The power of this secret is that it turns the VA's inaction into your legal leverage. Many veterans simply resubmit the same evidence after a denial. The smart veteran identifies the systemic failure, the DTA breach, and uses that failure as the basis for the next stage of the claim, forcing the VA to correct its mistake and often resulting in an expedited review to mitigate further liability stemming from the initial error. A highly effective tactical maneuver here is the DTA audit request, where you formally request a full accounting of all developmental actions taken on your file, forcing the VA to document their compliance or admit their failure to follow up. Finally, secret number 10, the one document they hope you never submit, the challenger document. This is the ultimate tactical maneuver for veterans who have received a low rating or a denial that seems medically impossible. The challenger document is not a standard form. It is a meticulously crafted, professional document submitted by a qualified medical professional, preferably one who specializes in VA claims, that directly challenges the VA's internal rating system, the specific DBQ used, or the findings of the C&P examiner. This is often referred to as an independent medical opinion, IMO, or a highly detailed nexus letter. But it goes further. It must specifically cite the VA's own internal documents, the Schedule for Rating Disabilities, 38 CFR Part 4, and the manuals of M21 procedure. For example, if the VA rated your migraine condition at 10% based on frequency, but your condition meets the criteria for 50% due to prostrating attacks requiring extended rest, your challenger document must state, the current 10% rating is inconsistent with 38 CFR Part 4.124a, Diagnostic Code 8100, which requires a 50% rating for frequent, completely prostrating attacks productive of severe economic inadaptability. The veteran's symptoms, as detailed in the attached migraine log and personal statement, meet this 50% threshold, rendering the current rating erroneous. Former VA employees know that when a veteran submits a document that speaks the VA's internal language, citing specific regulations and diagnostic codes, it bypasses the typical administrative review and requires a senior rater or supervisor to personally review the decision. Why do they hope you never submit it? Because it eliminates their ability to hide behind generalized medical opinions or administrative simplicity. It forces them to either approve the higher rating or provide an equally detailed, regulation-specific rebuttal. which is time-consuming and difficult to defend against a well-researched challenger. Document. This level of preparation transforms your claim from a request into a demand backed by the VA's own rulebook. It is the highest level of strategic engagement reserved for when you know the VA has fundamentally misapplied the law or the rating schedule to your unique case. These 10 secrets are not magic bullets, but they are the operational roadmap to navigating a system designed for complexity and delay. We have covered the hierarchy of evidence, segmenting your claims to avoid the stuck queue, treating the C&P exam as an adversarial deposition, mastering the VA's magic words for nexus and effective dates, anticipating the systemic bias toward denial, structuring your personal statement for maximum functional impact, leveraging internal deadlines, overcoming bias against TBI and mental health claims with objective markers, weaponizing the duty to assist failure, and finally, submitting the challenger document to force regulatory compliance. The core takeaway from all former VA staff is this: the VA claims process rewards preparation, specificity, and strategic aggression. It does not reward patience or vague appeals to fairness. You must stop thinking like a patient and start thinking like a lawyer building an unassailable case. Every piece of documentation must serve a specific, tactical purpose. Review your file now. Identify where your evidence falls in the hierarchy. Determine if you used the magic words. If you were denied, pinpoint the exact moment the VA failed its duty to assist. Take control of your claim. The system may be complex, but it is predictable, and now you have the playbook. Do not let the system defeat you through attrition. Use these secrets, claim the compensation you earned, and finally move forward with the life you deserve. This is your mission now. Go execute.